Chapter 1. The First Slips. The morning sun broke over Sweet Apple Acres, casting long, golden bars of light across the kitchen floor. The familiar, comforting scent of sizzling apple fritters and fresh oats filled the air, a stark contrast to the heavy, upside-down silence of the realm they had escaped just the day before. Applejack stood by the stove, a wooden spatula gripped firmly in her hoof as she flipped a golden-brown fritter. Big Mac sat at the heavy wooden table, staring quietly into a steaming mug of black coffee. "I'm telling ya, Mac," Applejack said, her voice dropping to a softer, raspy register as she looked over her shoulder, looking down into that yawning black void. "I don't think my heart has ever beat that fast in my entire life. When Spike told us what happened, it felt like the ground just vanished beneath my hooves." She set the spatula down and walked over to the table, resting a hoof on her brother's massive shoulder. "I just wanted to say, I'm so glad we saved our sister and her friends. And I really appreciate you, Mac. Not just as my brother, but as my friend. I love how much you love our little sister. You didn't hesitate for a single second to jump into that nightmare after her." Big Mac didn't lift his gaze from his mug, but his ears gave a slight, warm twitch. His deep voice rumbled through the quiet kitchen. Upstairs, the morning light filtered through the window of Apple Bloom's bedroom, illuminating the colorful bows, the scattered drawing paper, and the cozy, rustic furniture. On the bed, the small yellow earth pony stirred. She opened her eyes, but there was no morning grogginess in them. Instead, she slid out from under the covers with a fluid, unsettling stillness, her hooves making absolutely no sound against the wooden floorboards. She walked over to the vanity mirror. Standing before the glass, she didn't look at her mane or adjust her bow. She simply stared at her own reflection. Slowly, the vibrant, expressive color of her irises dissolved. In their place, her eyes widened into completely empty, pitch-black voids, two bottomless pits of absolute nothingness that seemed to swallow the morning light, identical to the glitch Rarity had missed in Sweetie Belle the night before. A cold, calculating sneer twisted her muzzle, completely shattering the innocent face of the filly she was mimicking. "Those fools freed us from Chaosville only to leave their sisters to suffer in that place, while we began our reign of terror," she whispered. Her voice dripped with a malicious, low hiss that didn't belong to a filly at all. She let out a quiet, wicked laugh that echoed faintly against the bedroom walls. Then, with a sudden blink, the dark voids vanished. Her eyes snapped back to their normal, bright, innocent appearance. She smoothed down her pink bow, took a deep breath, and practiced a wide, sunny smile in the glass. A moment later, the kitchen door creaked open, and the filly trotted into the room, her hooves clopping loudly on the floorboards as if she hadn't just been gliding like a ghost upstairs. "Morning, Applejack." "Morning, Big Mac," she piped up, her voice hitting that high, energetic pitch. "Morning, Sugar Cube," Applejack beamed, sliding a plate of fresh, hot fritters onto the table. "Look at you up and at 'em. Sit on down, you need to get some food in your belly after yesterday." The false Apple Bloom climbed onto the chair. She reached for a fork, but her hoof missed it entirely, her coordination slipping for a fraction of a second as if she wasn't entirely used to the weight and physics of an earth pony body. She quickly corrected herself, snatching the fork with a rigid grip. She took a massive bite of the fritter. For a split second, a look of profound disgust flashed across her face, her muzzle twitching at the taste of normal, wholesome food after years of whatever sustained her in the dark. Applejack paused, raising an eyebrow. "Everything taste all right, Apple Bloom? Baked 'em just the way you like." The filly's expression instantly smoothed out into a wide grin, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, yep. It's delicious. Just, still a little bit dizzy from all that falling, I guess. My throat feels a bit funny." Applejack's expression softened into pure sympathy, completely overlooking the strange reaction. "Oh, of course it does, sweetie. You took a terrible spill. You just take it easy today, you hear?" "I will," the entity promised, chewing carefully. "Actually, I'm meeting up with the rest of the Crusaders later on. We just want to sit together and talk about, well, everything." She looked up, putting on the most fragile, fearful face she could muster. "And I promise, Applejack, we are staying far away from that scary hole." "Darn right you are," Applejack sighed, walking over to press a gentle kiss to the top of the filly's head, completely oblivious to the creature sitting at her table. "Go on and have fun with your friends. You girls earned a quiet day." The morning at Carousel Boutique was usually filled with the gentle snip of shears, the rustle of silk, and Rarity humming a light melody as she worked. Today, however, the boutique was quiet. Rarity carried a beautifully arranged tray up the stairs, a silver dome covering a plate of fresh, delicate pastries alongside a cup of hot chamomile tea. Her heart was still tender from the terror of the previous afternoon, and she wanted nothing more than to spoil her little sister. She approached Sweetie Belle's bedroom door and knocked softly with a hoof. "Sweetie Belle, darling, are you awake?" From inside the room, there was a sharp, heavy silence before a voice snapped back. It was entirely devoid of the filly's usual warmth, cold, sharp, and dripping with irritation. "What do you want?" Rarity froze, her eyes widening in surprise at the uncharacteristic bite in the tone. Inside the room, the entity wearing Sweetie Belle's form instantly caught its mistake. It forced a gasp, softening its voice in a desperate hurry, pitching it back up to that familiar, fragile squeak. Oh, I'm so sorry, Rarity. I guess I'm just incredibly grumpy today." Rarity's tension melted away, replaced instantly by deep, sisterly sympathy. She nudged the door open with her shoulder, balancing the levitating tray in her blue magic. "Oh, it is quite all right, my goodness," Rarity said softly, stepping into the room. "I completely understand, sweetie. After everything you've been through, you have every right to be a bit out of sorts." She set the elegant tray down on the nightstand with a gentle clink. "I brought you your absolute favorite breakfast, and you had better come eat while it's nice and warm." The filly sat up in bed, turning toward Rarity. She offered a beautifully crafted, sweet smile, one that looked so perfectly innocent it would have fooled anyone. "Thank you so much, sis," she murmured, her voice practically dripping with affection. "You take such good care of me. I will be down there in just a moment, I promise. I just want to make sure I look my best first." Rarity's heart swelled, a proud, adoring smile breaking across her face. She adjusted her own mane out of habit. "That's my little sis. Never let a dramatic ordeal ruin your presentation." With a final, loving look, Rarity turned and left the room, closing the door softly behind her. The moment the latch clicked shut, the sweet smile instantly vanished from the filly's face. She slid off the bed, her posture shifting into a rigid, domineering stance. She turned toward the long mirror on her wardrobe, her gaze locking onto her reflection. With a cold, mocking smirk, her irises melted away once more. The empty, bottomless void black consumed her eyes, swallowing the reflection of the sunlit room. "They will never see it coming," she hissed into the empty room, her voice a low, terrifying echo of the nightmare within. "And when it does, nothing will stop my plan to make this realm mine." She let out a quiet, chilling laugh that died instantly as she closed her eyes. When she opened them, the emerald green circles of Sweetie Belle's eyes were back, bright and flawless. When she trotted downstairs to the dining area, she sat across from Rarity and began to eat. Unlike the creature pretending to be Apple Bloom, this entity didn't fumble with her silverware or show a single trace of disgust at the food. She used her magic with seamless precision, laughing at Rarity's chatter at the exact right moments and mimicking every tiny detail of Sweetie Belle's personality perfectly. She was clearly the main nightmare creature, the architect of the infiltration, and her mask was absolutely bulletproof. Deep within the true, suffocating void of Chaosville, the real Cutie Mark Crusaders were trapped in a bottomless expanse of absolute blackness. There was no sky, no ground beneath their hooves, only a heavy, frozen weight that seemed to press in on them from all sides. Echoing through the dark were the distant, agonizing sounds of wailing and muffled screams, rising and falling like a terrifying wind. The three fillies were huddled together so tightly that their coats rubbed against each other, trembling violently in the dark. "Our families and friends are coming for us at any moment," Apple Bloom whispered, her teeth chattering as she squeezed her eyes shut. "I just know it. Applejack and Big Mac, they won't ever stop looking." "I sure hope so," Scoodly muttered, her small wings twitching uselessly against her back as she tried to shield the others. "This place is terrifying. Why did you have to fall in that hole, sweetie?" Sweetie Belle snapped her head up, tears of frustration and fear welling in her eyes. "I didn't plan on falling in. Do you think I want to be here?" Scootaloo's posture slumped, her anger melting into pure exhaustion. She looked down at the empty dark. "I guess not. I'm sorry. I'm just upset." "We have to be tough, girls," Apple Bloom urged, trying to find her sister's signature grit inside her chest. "We're the Cutie Mark Crusaders. We don't give up." Just then, the temperature in the void plummeted. A sickening, scratching sound echoed right beside them, and a creature stepped out of the absolute blackness. The fillies gasped, freezing in sheer horror. It was something they had never seen before, a twisted monstrosity with long, hairless pony limbs, yet its body ended in pale, elongated arms with clawed hands. The thing had no face, only a smooth, pale hide that shifted under the dim, ambient light of the abyss. Slowly, it raised a long, spindly arm. A single clawed hand reached out, cold as ice, and brushed over the surface of Sweetie Belle's cutie mark. "Don't you touch me!" Sweetie Belle shrieked, recoiling violently and kicking her back legs out. The creature didn't flinch. Its body tilted, and a rasping, hollow voice emanated directly from its chest. "Give me your mark, and I will help you." Apple Bloom scrambled to the front, stepping protectively between her friends and the monster. "We aren't giving up our marks to you or any pony else. We worked too hard for em. If you don't freely give it to me," the creature responded, its long claws clicking together in the dark, "something will come along and take more than a cutie mark from you." Scootaloo swallowed hard, her voice shaking. What? What do you mean? You hear the screams, right?" The creature tilted its smooth, featureless head toward the echoing wails in the distance. "That is other creatures' worst nightmares coming true. And you think we trust your word on anything?" Apple Bloom barked, trying to hide the terror in her voice. "We don't even know what you are." The entity drew closer, its long limbs stretching unnaturally. "I'm a cutieman. I take ponies' marks. Normally I appear under beds or in closets, but you are here in my home." Sweetie Belle's eyes widened as an old foalhood memory sparked in her mind. "The cutieman? You are just a filly story." "No," the cutieman hissed, his claws extending. "I am very real. And I am coming to get you." With a sudden, aggressive lunge, the monster reached for Sweetie Belle's flank once more. Sweetie Belle screamed, but Apple Bloom didn't hesitate. Channeling every ounce of her family's farm-bred strength, Apple Bloom spun on her front hooves and bucked the creature squarely in its hairless chest with a loud crack. The cutieman reeled back into the shadows, letting out a hollow hiss. "Run!" Scootaloo yelled. All three fillies bolted blindly into the dark, their hooves frantically hitting the invisible floor of the void. Behind them, the cutieman's rasping voice echoed through the black. "SS, fading but clear, asterisk, there are far worse things than me out there. Asterisk." They ran until their lungs burned and their legs felt like lead. Finally, collapsing into a small heap to catch their breath, they listened closely. The scratching sounds had stopped, replaced only by the distant, ambient wailing of Chaosville. Apple Bloom wiped her sweaty brow, her chest heaving as she looked at her two best friends. "We can't just wait around," Apple Bloom said fiercely, her voice steadying. "We have to come up with a plan to get out of this place." Sweetie Belle and Scootaloo looked at each other, the fear in their eyes slowly turning into determination. They nodded in firm agreement. They were entirely on their own, and survival meant finding a way out before the worst things found them. Outside the cheerful, gingerbread-walled exterior of Sugar Cube Corner, the nightmare-wearing Scootaloo's form paced back and forth on the cobblestone path. Her tiny wings twitched with a restless, aggressive irritation as she muttered under her breath. "Where are they at? They should have been here by now." The bell above the bakery door jingled merrily, and Pinkie Pie stepped out onto the sidewalk, balancing a fresh tray of samples. Her bright blue eyes lit up as she spotted the orange Pegasus. "Oh, hi there, Scootaloo," Pinkie chirped, her mane bouncing with every word. "You waiting on the rest of the CMC?" The false Scootaloo stopped pacing and snapped her head around, her teeth bared in a brief, venomous snarl. "What do you think? Are you stupid or something?" Pinkie's jaw dropped slightly, her cheerful expression freezing in genuine shock for a fleeting second. But just as quickly, she let out a bright, bubbly giggle. "Wow, some pony is a grumpy guest today. Did you wake up on the wrong side of the nest?" The filly rolled her eyes with an exaggerated, heavy groan, turning her back to the baker. "I'm surprised Rainbow Dash isn't with you," Pinkie added, tilting her head curiously as she popped a stray sprinkle into her mouth. "Usually you two are attached at the hoof." She was, the entity muttered, her tone flat and completely short to the point. "But I got away from her." Pinkie giggled again, completely oblivious to the coldness radiating from the filly. "You are so funny, Scoot. Normally you would be begging your idol to stay. After all, you're her biggest fan." The fake Scootaloo stiffened, staring bluntly into the distance. "Well, we all have to grow up sometime." Pinkie blinked, a little taken aback by the sudden, dreary seriousness. "Not me. Growing up is totally optional." "Well, see you later, Scootaloo. Don't let the grumpy bugs bite." With a classic, gravity-defying bounce, Pinkie Pie traveled down the street, her singing voice fading into the town traffic. The moment Pinkie was out of sight, the bushes near the side of the bakery rustled, and the other two false crusaders stepped out into the open. Sweetie Belle's face was twisted into a harsh, demanding glare as she marched straight up to the Pegasus. "You didn't blow our cover, did you, idiot?" Sweetie Belle whispered, her voice a low, threatening hiss. "What makes you think I would do that?" Scootaloo shot back, though her voice lacked its previous bravado. Instantly, Sweetie Belle's emerald eyes dissolved into pure, empty void black. Her horn flared to life, sparking not with her normal pale green light, but with a crackling, smoky black magic that made the ambient air feel suddenly ice-cold. The fake Scootaloo shrank back, her wings pinning flat against her sides in genuine terror. "Please, don't. I promise I stayed in character. The pink one just talks too much." The dark aura vanished, and Sweetie Belle's eyes snapped back to their innocent green. She adjusted her cape with a cold, aristocratic precision. "If I find out you slipped up, I will personally send you back to the darkness. Do you understand me?" The Pegasus entity shivered violently, nodding her head in a frantic hurry. The false apple bloom stepped forward, a heavy, wicked grin spreading across her muzzle as she looked between them. "So, Nightmare Syndrome, what's the plan?" The creature posing as Sweetie Belle turned her gaze toward the distant, shimmering spires of Canterlot Mountain, a sinister, triumphant smirk stretching across her face. "First things first," the entity whispered, the true malice of the Nightmare Syndrome bleeding through the filly's voice. "We need to get a meeting with the Princess of Dreams so that we can take her magic." Apple Bloom's face contorted into a devilish, plotting look, her eyes glinting with a dark satisfaction. Princess Luna was the only guardian of the dream realm, and if they could consume her power, the waking world would be entirely defenseless. The creature posing as Sweetie Belle narrowed her eyes, her voice dropping into a chilling, methodical whisper as she laid out the trap. "Princess Luna saves ponies from their nightmares. So, if we were to have a nightmare, she would come to us in a dream. Then, that is where we would set our trap." Apple Bloom's eyes lit up with a wicked, malicious gleam. "This is perfect. And once you have her power, you can bring an eternal nightmare to this realm." All three of them broke into a horrifying, synchronized laugh, a jagged, echoing sound that did not belong in the peaceful streets of Ponyville. Turning on their hooves, they began to trot toward the dark edge of the ever-free forest to finalize their plot. "Hey girls, are you doing okay?" The gentle, soft-spoken voice of Fluttershy cut through the air, making the three impostors freeze mid-step. Fluttershy was standing just a few paces away near the tree line, her kind eyes filled with genuine concern. The fake Scootaloo instantly bristled, her jaw tightening as she started to make a rude remark. "What do you want, you?" Before the word could leave her mouth, Sweetie Belle violently stuffed her hoof directly into Scootaloo's muzzle, cutting her off with a muffled grunt. Sweetie Belle forced her own face into a wide, beaming smile, though her eyes shot a deadly, icy glare down at the Pegasus that clearly said, "If you mess up, you're dead." "We are doing much better, Fluttershy," Sweetie Belle chirped, her voice perfectly smooth and innocent as she pulled her hoof away from Scootaloo's mouth. Fluttershy blinked, looking a bit startled by the sudden movement, and her ears drooped slightly. "Oh, am I bothering you? If I am so sorry." "Not at all." Sweetie Belle reassured her quickly, adjusting her stance. "We were just on our way to our clubhouse. We were playing the quiet game, and it's Scootaloo's turn to be quiet." Fluttershy's pink wings gave a light, puzzled flutter as she tilted her head. "Oh, well, I have never heard it played where only one pony goes at a time." Seeing the suspicion baseline ripple, the fake Apple Bloom quickly spoke up to cover the crack. "We were seeing who could keep their yelps shut the longest." "Oh, I see," Fluttershy said, her gentle nature overriding her confusion. She offered a small, apologetic smile. "I'm sorry I bothered you." Sweetie Belle smiled warmly, her tone practically dripping with sweet affection. "It's perfectly fine. We love you, Fluttershy." Fluttershy blushed at the sweet comment, her cheeks turning a soft pink. "Oh, thank you, girls. You have fun now." With a final wave of her tail, she trotted off down the path toward her cottage. The moment Fluttershy's back was turned and she was safely out of earshot, the sweet expression vanished from Sweetie Belle's face, like turning off a light. She snapped around, cornering the orange Pegasus against the dirt path. Her eyes flashed with a dangerous, dark intensity as she growled under her breath. "You really are terrible at this." The Crusaders had managed to find a bizarre, dilapidated wooden cabin wedged sideways between two massive boulder formations. Inside, the suffocating atmosphere of the void lifted slightly, and the agonizing wails of Chaosville were muffled to a low, distant hum. But there was no comfort here. Looking out the cracked glass of the window, the landscape was a surreal nightmare. Twisted, gnarled trees drifted lazily through the sky like uprooted seaweed. A heavy, gray fog didn't rise from the ground, it fell from above, cascading down in thick, unnatural curtains. High above the fog, massive, tattered silhouettes circled the distorted horizon. They were wraiths, creatures made of shredded shadow and pale, glowing bone, squalling with a sound like a localized hurricane. Sweetie Belle pressed her nose against the glass, pointing a trembling hoof into the sky. What are those things?" Apple Bloom and Scootaloo crowded around her, staring up. Neither of them had an answer, but the raw, malicious energy radiating from the sky told them everything they needed to know. They weren't anything good. Suddenly, Sweetie Belle let out a sharp, piercing scream, stumbling backward off her hooves. One of the circling wraiths broke formation. It plummeted straight out of the sky, its wings slicing through the falling fog like jagged blades. On the ground below, a small, multi-legged chaotic creature, resembling a rabbit with a lizard's tail, was frantically scurrying for cover. It wasn't fast enough. The wraith struck with sickening speed. Instead of biting or tearing with physical claws, the shadow creature draped its tattered, smoky wings entirely over the small animal, pinning it to the inverted grass. The horror of what happened next made the Crusaders' blood run cold. The wraith didn't want the creature's body. It wanted its essence. The shadow began to pulse, and the lizard rabbit's vibrant colors were violently vacuumed out of its skin, turning its fur a static, dead gray. The little creature's eyes rolled back as its very emotions, its panic, its memories, its life force, were physically ripped from its chest in the form of a glowing, fractured mist. The wraith inhaled the mist with a guttural, satisfied roar. When the monster finally unfurled its wings and took flight once more, nothing was left on the ground but a brittle, empty husk that crumbled into ash and scattered into the wind. Inside the cabin, the fillies were paralyzed. Scootaloo slumped against the wall, her hooves over her ears, breathing in short, jagged gasps. Apple Bloom gripped Sweetie Belle's foreleg so tightly her knuckles hurt, her face completely drained of color. The Cutieman's words echoed in their heads with a terrifying new weight. There are far worse things than me out there. We need to find a way out of here, Apple Bloom choked out, her voice cracking as she forced herself away from the window. Right now. Driven by pure survival instinct, the three of them began frantically tearing through the cabin. The shelves were lined with heavy, dust-covered volumes bound in strange, rough leather. They slammed the books open on a crooked table, desperately searching for a map, a spell, or any mention of a doorway back to Equestria. But frustration quickly set in. I can't read any of this. Scootaloo cried out, slamming her hoof onto an open page. It looks like a bunch of random, garbled nonsense. Is it a secret code? The letters were completely alien, a jumble of characters that defied standard equestrian grammar. Apple Bloom squinted at a sentence, rubbing her temples. Maybe it's ancient unicorn magic? Sweetie Belle didn't answer. She leaned over a thick tome, her horn casting a faint, anxious green light over the text. She stared at a specific line, her eyes starting from the right side of the page to the left. She blinked, a sudden spark of recognition cutting through her panic. Wait, Sweetie Belle whispered, tracing the letters backward with her hoof. Look at the letters. They aren't random. The magic of this place is upside down and backwards, so the writing is too. It's written completely in reverse. She pointed to a line of text. If a pony back home were to write, "The pony ate an apple," the book in front of them displayed it like a twisted mirror reflection. Elpa na eta and not beti. If we read it from right to left, letter by letter, Sweetie Belle said, a desperate wave of hope washing over her face, we can actually understand it. Apple Bloom's face lit up with a sudden burst of classic farm pony resourcefulness. We can put the pages in front of the mirror to read it. Brilliant. Sweetie Belle gasped, hauling the heavy tome off the table. They scrambled across the slanted floorboards of the cabin toward a tarnished, oval mirror hanging crookedly on the wall. Sweeping away the thick layers of dust with their hooves, they held the open book up to the glass. Sure enough, the reflection flipped the backward text perfectly, aligning the letters into readable equestrian. Okay, let's see. Sweetie Belle squinted at the reflection, reading out loud. Once upon a time, a little dragon lived in a swamp. Ugh, it's just a silly filly book. Frustrated, they dropped the volume and grabbed another one, hoisting it up to the mirror. The properly balanced diet of a manicore. No, that won't help. Scootaloo grunted, tossing the book over her shoulder. One by one, books flew through the air, piling up on the floor as they sifted through journals on chaotic weather patterns, upside-down gardening, and nonsense poetry. Finally, Apple Bloom dragged a massive, midnight blue book with a faded silver eye embossed on the cover toward the glass. Sweetie Belle's eyes scanned the flipped text in the reflection. Wait. Asterisk, a guide to the pocket zones and drain pipes of the fractured spheres. Asterisk, this is it. It talks about the thresholds between worlds. They leaned in closer, their breaths fogging the old glass as they tried to decipher the instructions for opening a pathway home. But as they read, the smooth surface of the mirror began to ripple like disturbed water. The reflection of the fillies grew distorted, warping and stretching into something grotesque. Before any of them could react, the glass didn't just show an image, it became a physical gateway. A pale, multi-jointed hand, dripping with a thick, liquid darkness, suddenly exploded out of the center of the mirror. The elongated fingers extended with a sickening click, lunging straight forward. It clutched onto the front of Apple Bloom's coat, its grip like iron as it began dragging her toward the glass, trying to pull her body inside to trap her within the mirror's reflection forever, the exact, cruel nature of a malicious Ungekyo. Apple Bloom. Sweetie Belle shrieked, grabbing her friend's hind legs as the filly was pulled flush against the frame. Get off her. Scootaloo roared. Driven by pure adrenaline, the orange Pegasus spun around, grabbed the heaviest Manticore diet book from the floor, and slammed it with all her might directly into the center of the glass. Crash! The mirror shattered into a web of explosive fractures, exploding outward in a spray of silver shards. The pale hand let out a muffled, hollow shriek as it was severed by the breaking glass, dissolving into black smoke before it could drag Apple Bloom through. Apple Bloom fell backward onto the floor, gasping for air and clutching her chest. "Is everyone okay?" Scootala panted, dropping the ruined book. But their relief lasted for less than a heartbeat. On the floor, the hundreds of tiny shattered pieces of glass didn't lie still. Instead, they began to slide and click together across the wood like a swarm of silver insects. Every single fragment, no matter how small, still held a tiny reflection of the hairless, featureless face of the entity from the mirror. From the floor, 100 tiny, overlapping voices hissed out of the shards in a grating, fractured chorus. Asterisk, breaking the glass only gives me more eyes and more doorways. Asterisk. Suddenly, from 3 of the larger shards on the floor, 3 separate pale hands began to stretch upward, growing larger by the second as they clawed at the air, pinning the Crusaders against the back wall of the cabin. The entity wasn't stopped at all, it had just multiplied. Inside the crystalline walls of the Castle of Friendship, twilight had long since faded into a grueling, all-night research marathon. The library table was completely buried under a mountain of heavy leather tomes, ancient scrolls, and crumbling historical texts. Twilight sparkle and starlight glimmer moved from shelf to shelf in a blur of exhaustion, their horns glowing with tired lavender and teal magic. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on both of them. They couldn't allow another pony, or any living creature, to suffer the terrifying fate that had almost claimed the Cutie Mark Crusaders. "The fundamental problem," Starlight muttered, rubbing her bleary eyes with a hoof as she hovered a scroll in front of her face, "is that the infinity hole defies basic physical laws. We can't just shovel dirt into it like a normal trench. Because it acts as an open drain pipe to a pocket zone, any normal matter we throw down there will just float endlessly into the void or get sucked straight into Chaosville." "Exactly," Twilight agreed, her wings giving a tense, frustrated flutter. "It requires a localized space-time patch. We need a magical matrix that bonds to the lips of the tier and creates a hardened, impenetrable barrier." At long last, just as the first faint light of dawn began to touch the crystal windows, Twilight let out a triumphant gasp. She pointed a tired hoof at a heavily illustrated volume on high-level containment fields. "Here. If we combine a structural anchoring spell with a phase inversion barrier, we might be able to weave a permanent seal. But both of us need to run some physical tests first. I don't want to risk casting an unverified matrix directly over a live cosmic anomaly." Hurrying out into the secluded courtyard behind the castle, the 2 unicorns immediately went to work setting up a controlled testing field. Using their raw magic, they blasted a series of deep, narrow trenches into the dirt to serve as simulated anomalies. Then, the trial and error began, and Chaosville's lingering influence made the results wildly unpredictable. On their first attempt, Starlight channeled the phase inversion spell, but the magical frequencies clashed with the earth. With a loud boom, the test hole exploded in a shower of hot mud and purple sparks, forcing both ponies to dive for cover. "Too much kinetic feedback." Starlight coughed, shaking dirt out of her mane. They adjusted the calculations and tried a second combination on a new trench. This time, the magic backfired completely, causing a localized gravity surge that began drilling the hole rapidly deeper and deeper on its own, threatening to undermine the courtyard until Twilight cut the power with a sharp burst of counter-magic. On the third test, the hole didn't explode or deepen. Instead, the air around it rippled like a heat mirage, and a bizarre, multicolored substance began leaking out of the opening like thick fluid, followed by a sudden, jarring pop. Lying perfectly in the grass beside the trench was a single, completely alien object, a strange, lace-up human shoe made of canvas and rubber. Twilight blinked, walking over to poke it with her hoof in utter bewilderment. "What in the world is A? Actually, let's not lose focus. The dimensional bleeding is too high on that frequency." They returned to the drawing board, narrowing down the magical calculations, stabilizing the anchoring runes, and tightening the containment borders. Finally, on their 5th attempt, they synchronized their horns perfectly. A beautiful, Shimmering lattice of interlocking lavender and teal energy wove itself across the test hole, hardening into a solid, glass-like seal that resisted every physical and magical strike they threw at it. "We did it," Starlight panted, a relieved smile breaking across her face. "The Matrix holds." "Perfect," Twilight said, her voice tight with renewed determination. "Let's go inside, gather the amplified focus crystals, and get prepared. It's time to head into the Everfree Forest. And plug that nightmare for good." Deep within the thick, tangled heart of the Everfree Forest, the three fake crusaders gathered inside their secluded wooden clubhouse. The rustic room, once filled with innocent banners and plans for getting cutie marks, now felt icy and oppressive. They huddled in a tight circle, finalizing their trap for the princess of the night. They understood the ancient, volatile rules of nightmare magic perfectly, but they also knew that Princess Luna was the master of the dreamscape. One wrong frequency, one trace of unfamiliar malice, and she would realize she wasn't entering a filly's subconscious. She would see the trap before she even stepped through. The creature wearing Sweetie Belle's form looked at the other two, her eyes narrowing into cold slits. "First, we have to be near one another when we go to sleep so that we can link our nightmares. Then, once we are ready, we will trap her in her own worst nightmare." A collective, jagged chuckle rippled through the trio. The false Scootaloo crossed her forelegs, a confident smirk spreading across her muzzle. "She will never see it coming." Sweetie Belle leaned in dangerously close, her voice dropping into a low, terrifying hiss that made the shadows in the corner of the room ripple. "Unless you screw this up. And if you do, I will make sure you go back to the darkness, and go so deep you will never return from it." The entity playing Apple Bloom let out a wicked, mocking laugh at the Pegasus's expense, thoroughly enjoying the threat. Frustrated and defensive, the fake Scootaloo snapped her head around, her mask slipping as she growled out a name from their true home. "Shut up, delusional misery." Apple Bloom's wicked smile vanished, replaced by an aggressive snarl. She lunged forward, shoving the Pegasus hard against the wooden table. "Why don't you make me phantom haunt?" "Shut up, both of you," Sweetie Belle roared. Before either of them could strike back, Sweetie Belle's horn erupted in a brilliant, crackling aura of smoky black magic. With an effortless flick of her head, the shockwave of dark energy seized both Phantom Haunt and Delusional Misery, lifting them off the ground and slamming them violently against the back wall of the clubhouse. The impact rattled the loose tools on the shelves. The two entities slid down to the floorboards, groaning and rubbing their bruised shoulders, their filly facades temporarily fracturing into shadowy, shifting outlines before stabilizing. They looked up at the main nightmare creature with a mixture of resentment and genuine fear. "Yes, nightmare syndrome," they muttered in unison, bowing their heads in submission. Nightmare syndrome extinguished the dark magic on her horn, her emerald eyes returning to their perfect, deceptive glow. "Good. Tonight, the dream realm falls." The three crusaders pressed their backs against the rotting wooden wall of the cabin, their breath coming in panicked gasps as the silver shards across the floor violently shifted. From three of the largest fragments, the pale, fluid-drenched hands of the Ungekyo stretched upward, their elongated fingers clicking and clawing through the air as they moved toward the terrified fillies. Apple Bloom looked at Sweetie Belle and Scootaloo, who were trembling violently beside her, and then her eyes started to the floor. The massive midnight blue book on Pocket Zones, their only literal map back to Equestria, was lying face down just inches away from the shattered frame. She knew they couldn't leave it behind. If they lost that book, they were trapped in Chaosville forever. "Hold on," Apple Bloom cried. Without a single thought for her own safety, she dug her hooves into the wood and took a desperate, flying leap over the crawling shards. Her hooves touched down near the book, but the movement triggered the mirror demon. A pale, multi-jointed hand shot out from the largest piece of glass. The cold, clawed fingers clamped violently around Apple Bloom's pink mane, twisting and jerking her head backward with a sickening yank. She screamed as her face was forced straight down to look directly into the jagged, reflective surface of the shard. As she stared into the silver reflection, the cabin vanished. The glass began to ripple, and a monstrous, distorted face materialized from the depths of the mirror, merging with her own reflection. It was the face of her internal demon, a manifestation of her deepest psychological vulnerabilities and fears. Suddenly, the mirror showed her a vision of sweet apple acres, but it was dead, cold, and ruined. Standing in the orchard were Applejack, Big Mac, and Granny Smith, but their eyes were completely blank, staring right through her as if she didn't exist. "You left us," the mirror demon hissed in a twisted combination of her family's voices. Asterisk, "You went into the woods for a silly game, and now you're dead to us. We've forgotten you, Apple Bloom. You're completely alone." Asterisk. The vision shifted, showing her best friends turning their backs on her, fading into the suffocating fog of the void. The sheer terror of being entirely abandoned, of losing the family and friends who formed the absolute foundation of her life, crushed her chest. To Sweetie Belle and Scootaloo, Apple Bloom was suddenly frozen, staring into the glass with wide, unblinking eyes as tears streamed down her cheeks, her body shaking as she let out a series of broken, helpless sobs. "Apple Bloom!" Scootaloo yelled. "We have to pull her away," Sweetie Belle cried. Not knowing what horror she was seeing, but knowing their friend was being psychologically destroyed, the two Crusaders lunged forward across the room to pull her back. But the Ungekyo was waiting for them. The moment they entered the center of the room, the other two large shards on the floor erupted. Pale, spindly arms whipped through the air like striking vipers, grabbing Sweetie Belle by her coat and Scootaloo by her wing, slamming them down flush against the remaining pieces of broken glass. "No, let me go," Scootaloo roared, thrashing wildly. "Look at yourselves," the fractured chorus of the mirror demon echoed from the floorboards, forcing their gazes down into the silver shards. Asterisk, "See what you truly are." Asterisk. For Scootaloo, the shard revealed her deepest, most painful insecurity. In the reflection, she saw a twisted, adult version of herself, still ground-bound, her wings withered, small, and utterly useless. Beside her stood Rainbow Dash, looking down at her with an expression of profound disappointment and disgust. "You're a Pegasus who can't even fly," the reflection taunted, tearing away her tough exterior. Asterisk, "You're a burden. A broken wing. You'll never be a real hero." Asterisk. Beside her, Sweetie Belle was forced into her own reflective nightmare. Her shard didn't show her fears, it showed her deepest ins, amplifying every trace of jealousy and bitterness she had ever felt toward her older sister. The mirror showed her an image of Carousel Boutique completely engulfed in emerald green flames, with a monstrous, shadowy version of herself holding a glowing horn, laughing as she destroyed everything Rarity loved out of pure, petty spite. "You want to surpass her," the demon whispered into her mind. Asterisk, "You hate being in her shadow. You want to burn it all down." Asterisk. All three fillies were completely paralyzed now, pinned to the floor by the pale hands of the Ungekyo, weeping and struggling as the mirror demons systematically dismantled their minds, feeding on the raw horror of their worst internal nightmares. Deep within the Everfree forest, Twilight Sparkle and Starlight Glimmer stood before the jagged, swirling edge of the infinity hole. The air around the rift hummed with an unstable, erratic frequency that made the grass beneath their hoofs float upward in slow motion before dissolving into thin air. Twilight held up a hoof, stopping Starlight just as she began to charge her horn with the teal containment matrix. "Starlight, wait," Twilight said, her expression tight with sudden caution. "Before we cast this, we need to consider the broader dimensional physics. If we seal this tear too aggressively, what if the sudden displacement causes kinetic feedback? If the pressure inside the pocket zone builds up, a backdoor rupture could open right in the middle of Ponyville, pulling creatures from that other world directly into town." Starlight lowered her horn, nodding slowly. "You're right. And there's an even bigger problem. Discord. He's still somewhere out there dealing with the aftermath of this rift. If we lock this threshold down completely without checking the dimensional anchor points, we might permanently sever his link to this reality. It would break Fluttershy's heart if he could never return." Exactly, Twilight agreed. We can't risk losing him, and we can't risk an accidental breach. We need to run a small-scale resonance test directly on the lip of the hole, just enough to measure the feedback loop before we commit to the full seal. As the two Maras stepped closer to the anomaly to begin their delicate calculations, a very different kind of trap was being sprung back in the heart of Ponyville. Nightmare syndrome, delusional misery, and phantom haunt trotted through the streets under the cover of the gathering dusk, their target locked. They had carefully weighed their options for where to stage their shared nightmare. Sweet Apple Acres was completely out of the question. The sprawling farmhouse was constantly buzzing with the rest of the Apple family, and Big Mac or Applejack would notice a dark magical spike instantly. Scootaloo's home was equally dangerous, guarded by her fiercely protective aunts and the frequent, unexpected flybys of Rainbow Dash. But Carousel Boutique? Carousel Boutique was quiet, elegant, and inhabited by only a single, notoriously generous unicorn. Pushing the front door open, the trio stepped into the brightly lit showroom. Hearing the bell chime, Rarity trotted down the spiral staircase, a measuring tape draped over her neck. "Oh, Sweetie Belle, darlings. I thought you three were heading to the clubhouse." Nightmare syndrome didn't waste a heartbeat. Slipping effortlessly into her perfect imitation of Sweetie Belle, she dropped her ears, widened her sparkling green eyes, and let out a soft, trembling sigh, executing a flawless puppy dog pout. "Please, Rarity, can we have a sleepover here tonight?" she begged, her voice dripping with calculated innocence. "We promise we will be absolutely on our best behavior." Delusional misery chimed in right on cue, twisting Apple Bloom's face into a sweet, country smile. "Yep, we sure will, Miss Rarity. We won't even have a bad dream," Scootaloo boasted proudly. Nightmare syndrome's smile stiffened. She shot a sharp, murderous look sideways at Phantom Haunt for bringing up the word dream before quickly snapping her gaze back to Rarity, intensifying the begging look. Rarity's heart completely melted. She clutched her hooves to her chest, her dramatic maternal instincts taking over. "Oh, you poor, sweet things. After everything the three of you have been through with that dreadful hole in the forest, I think a quiet night in is a fabulous idea. Of course you can stay." The three impostors lunged forward, wrapping their forelegs around Rarity in a tight, synchronized hug that felt entirely warm to the fashionista, but icy to anyone who knew the truth. "Thank you, Rarity," Nightmare syndrome chirped. "Now, straight up to bed, darlings," Rarity said, shooing them gently toward the stairs. "Get a wonderful night's rest, and don't let the bedbugs bite." Scootaloo smirked, a wicked glint in her eye. "Don't worry about us. Worry about the bedbugs." Nightmare syndrome's jaw tightened. She glared at the Pegasus with an intensity that could melt iron. "Great joke, Scootaloo. Hilarious." Apple Bloom forced out a loud, hollow fake laugh to cover the tension. "Ha ha. Good one, Scoot." They hurried up the stairs and ducked into Sweetie Belle's bedroom, slamming the door shut behind them. The moment the latch clicked, the innocent expressions vanished from their faces. Nightmare syndrome whirled around, her horns sparking with a faint, dangerous trace of black smoke as she pinned Scootaloo with a freezing glare. "Just keep your mouth shut from now on unless some pony explicitly talks to you. You're going to give us away before the princess even gets here." Phantom Haunt merely nodded, her smirk returning as she climbed onto the mattress. Side by side, the three nightmare entities crawled into the bed, pulling the blankets up to their chins. They closed their eyes, their muzzles twisting into identical, sinister grins as they began to sync their minds, waiting for the dark pull of the dreamscape and the arrival of Princess Luna. Just as Twilight and Starlight prepared to channel their delicate test matrix into the infinity hole, a bright pink blur exploded out from the thickets. "Hi, girls." Both unicorns shrieked, their magic sputtering out in a shower of startled sparks as they jumped a foot into the air. "Pinky," Twilight gasped, clutching a hoof to her racing chest. "What are you doing out here in the middle of the night?" "Yeah, you scared us half to death," Starlight wheezed, leaning against a nearby boulder. Pinkie Pie smiled radiantly, bouncing in a perfectly physics-defying circle right along the very edge of the swirling cosmic rift. Why are you two so jumpy? I just brought you some snacks. Every pony needs snacks when they're up late. Especially when they're working on sealing a super-duper-duper scary magical hole that's just waiting to have creepy creatures pop out for a party. Twilight sighed, shaking her head. Pinkie, I really don't think whatever is down there would be coming here to party. Pinkie's bright smile dropped into a sudden pout, her shoulders slumping. Probably not. From the ones we met yesterday, they seemed like real party poopers. Just like Scootaloo was earlier today. Starlight froze, her ears perking up. She exchanged a quick look with Twilight before turning back to the pink earth pony. Scootaloo? What was wrong with her? Oh, Scootaloo's vibe was completely flat. Pinkie explained, gesturing wildly with her hooves. Like a totally deflated, forgotten birthday cake. No bounce, no zest, just thud. Are you sure she wasn't just overly tired from yesterday? Twilight rationalized, trying to remain logical. I mean, she did go through a massive ordeal. Anyone would be exhausted and irritable after falling into an anomaly. Pinkie opened her mouth to reply, but she suddenly went completely rigid. Her eyes widened, her ears clamped down, and her bright, poofy tail began to twitch and vibrate at an absolute mile a minute. Twitch, 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 flop. Pinkie blinked, staring down at her own tail in utter bewilderment. Huh. That is super-duper strange. Normally my tail only does that specific jiggly-wiggly when someone is about to perform an amazing, mind-boggling stunt. Twilight stopped what she was doing completely. The colorful containment crystals slipped from her magical grip, clattering into the grass. Her expression grew deadly serious. Starlight, this is going to sound crazy, but I learned a long time ago that you never ignore the Pinkie sense. They both stared at Pinkie, whose tail was practically going into overdrive now, vibrating so fast it was a pink blur. Now that I think about it, Pinkie muttered, her usual cheerful tone dropping into a rare, genuine frown. Scootaloo was just kind of rude and totally cold earlier. And right now, my Pinkie sense is practically shouting that something is very, very wrong with that filly. Twilight's eyes dilated with a sudden, chilling realization. What if it isn't really Scootaloo? Or, what if it is her, but something from the pocket zone followed her out and is controlling her? Starlight gasped, her teal aura flaring with sudden panic. The Cutie Mark Crusaders. They're always together. If something has taken over Scootaloo, we need to get to her and the rest of the girls right away. What if she hurt Sweetie Belle or Apple Bloom? We're going to town right now, Twilight commanded. As the two unicorns turned to bolt toward Ponyville, Pinkie Pie, completely oblivious to the danger, started absent-mindedly walking backward along the microscopic lip of the infinity hole, casually juggling 3 cupcakes she had pulled from her mane. Without breaking stride, Twilight and Starlight synchronized their telekinesis, wrapping twin auras of lavender and teal magic around Pinkie's midsection and violently dragging her away from the abyss as they sprinted at full speed into the dark forest, heading for town. Meanwhile, upstairs in the quiet, shadowed master bedroom of Carousel Boutique, the 3 masquerading entities slipped beneath the veil of consciousness. In the center of the dream realm, they carefully constructed their web. It was a masterpiece of psychological bait, a manifestation of a terrifying, fractured landscape meant to look exactly like the horrors of Chaosville. In the center of the dream, the fake Sweetie Belle cowered on a floating island of inverted earth, surrounded by a swirling horde of jagged, red-eyed shadow monsters, including a towering, monstrous projection of Nightmare Syndrome itself. They knew the ancient laws of the cosmos. Princess Luna was bound by her royal duty and her profound love for her subjects. She could never ignore the agonizing psychic scream of a terrified filly. Please, some pony help me. Nightmare Syndrome cried out into the digital ether of the dreamscape, pitching her voice to a perfect, heart-wrenching sob as the fake monsters closed in on her. Right on cue, the sky above split open in a flash of brilliant midnight blue and stardust. With a mighty, thundering sweep of her dark, ethereal wings, Princess Luna descended like a falling star. Her mane flowed with the shifting nebulae of the cosmos, and her eyes flashed with royal authority as she landed squarely between the weeping filly and the approaching shadows. "Dear child." Luna's powerful voice echoed, instantly radiating a protective dome of silver, soothing starlight that pushed the dream monsters back. "This is just thine own dream, so do not fear. Nothing within this realm can possess the power to harm thee while we are present." But as Luna reached out a comforting hoof toward the filly, she suddenly froze. Her cosmic mane faltered, the stars within it flickering violently. As the master of dreams, Luna's mind was attuned to the baseline psychic frequencies of all living things, and a sudden, agonizing spike of raw, unadulterated torment slammed into her spiritual radar. It wasn't coming from this dream. It was a real, distant, crushing agony radiating from the actual Cutie Mark Crusaders, currently being psychologically disassembled by the Ungekyo in the real Chaosville. The sheer contradiction shattered Luna's focus. She blinked, confused, distracted, and momentarily blinded by the overlapping echoes of suffering. What is this ripple? This pain is real yet. No. Nightmare Syndrome hissed, dropping her filly facade entirely. Using the exact microsecond of Luna's hesitation, the trap snapped shut. From the shadows beneath the floating island, delusional misery and phantom haunt exploded into view. Instantly, delusional misery unleashed her primary core ability, weaving a dense, suffocating fog of visual and auditory delusions around the Alicorn. The sky twisted into a chaotic kaleidoscope of false threats, blurring Luna's sight and making the ground feel like shifting quicksand. Simultaneously, Phantom Haunt channeled her paralyzing curse. A freezing, invisible weight slammed into Luna's joints, locking her massive wings to her sides and freezing her hooves to the dream floor. But Princess Luna was not some weak, fragile pony. She was the Diarch of the night, a veteran of cosmic warfare who had commanded the tides of the subconscious for a millennium. "Insolent parasites!" Luna roared, her voice dropping into the terrifying, booming resonance of the royal Canterlot voice. With a ferocious surge of willpower, Luna violently forced her magic to ignite. A blinding, supernova-like shockwave of pure lunar energy erupted from her body, instantly shattering delusional misery's illusions into dust and tearing through Phantom Haunt's paralysis like brittle ice. The force of the blast sent both entities flying backward through the dreamscape with shrieks of pain. Luna reared back, her silver shoes striking the air as her horn blazed with a fierce, dangerous blue fire. "What art thou? Declare your true nature, foul phantoms." Nightmare Syndrome. Recovering instantly, lunged forward with terrifying speed, her filly form dissolving into a towering, skeletal mass of black tendrils and jagged claws. Your worst nightmare come true. With a vicious, downward strike, Nightmare Syndrome drove her razor-sharp nightmare claws directly against Luna's glowing horn, attempting to physically sever her connection to her magic. Luna gasped, a sharp pang of agony lancing through her skull, but she refused to yield. Gritting her teeth, she focused her magic into a concentrated, razor-thin beam of stellar energy, blasting it directly into Nightmare Syndrome's chest. The dark entity howled as the cosmic light burned through its shadowy flesh, smoking and sizzling. "Delusional! Phantom! Bind her!" Nightmare Syndrome screamed, desperately clinging to Luna's horn as she began to forcefully siphon the raw, ancient Alicorn magic, a toxic purple energy bleeding out of Luna and into the creature's claws. From the flanks, the other two entities threw themselves back into the fray with suicidal desperation. Delusional misery flooded Luna's mind with the agonizing, illusory screams of her sister Celestia falling into darkness, attacking her psychological armor. Phantom Haunt poured every ounce of her dark essence into a localized stasis field, causing Luna's legs to buckle beneath her as her muscles locked up once more. Luna fought like a cornered lioness. She thrashed violently, her wings flaring as she blasted bursts of starlight in every direction, tearing chunks out of the dreamscape itself. But the combination of the psychic distraction from the real fillies, the mental assault of her deepest insecurities, and the physical drain on her horn was a suffocating vice. Slowly, inexorably, nightmare syndrome began to pull Luna down into a state of her own worst nightmare, the ancient princess's eyes clouding over with a terrifying, dark mist as her priceless magical essence was systematically drained into the darkness.